Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to ESG Talks, a KBRA podcast series focusing on environmental, social, and governance, ESG. This podcast series highlights various ESG hot topics and includes commentary from prominent voices within the ESG community. In this episode, I chat with Gordon Kerr, KBRA's head of European research and host of KBRA's Conversations in Europe Credit podcast. Gordon and I chat about a recent research report that he published titled Offshore Wind, Opportunities and Challenges to Irish Development. This piece examines the opportunities and challenges facing Ireland's renewable energy market, as well as how the country's ambitious renewable energy targets could transform into a realistic proposition over the coming years. Offshore wind energy has been a prominent feature of the Danish, UK, and other European markets for several years, and now presents an emerging opportunity to transform Ireland's energy markets. However, significant obstacles lie ahead, including political, regulatory, and commercial challenges. Gordon and I talk through key takeaways from his piece and implications for the future. Hi, everyone. This is Arianne Schreier, an Associate Director on KBRA's ESG team. Gordon, thanks so much for coming on to discuss your recent research piece titled Offshore Wind, Opportunities and Challenges to Irish Development. In recent years, offshore wind has become a major player in the energy markets of countries like Denmark and the UK, and now Ireland is positioning itself to follow suit with some incredibly ambitious offshore wind growth targets. Can you explain what these targets are and why they are significant?
Yeah, certainly. Ireland's offshore wind targets are indeed very ambitious, aiming to deliver 20 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2040 and rising to 37 gigawatts by 2050. This is more than triple the current nameplate capacity and represents a major leap for Ireland's energy market. By 2030, Ireland aims for 5 gigawatts of grid-connected offshore wind and an additional 2 gigawatts of floating offshore wind projects. The significance of this target lies in the fact that it would not only meet domestic electricity needs, but also position Ireland as a potential net energy exporter, contributing to the wider European renewable energy landscape. Achieving this goal would also dramatically reduce Ireland's reliance on imported energy and help to meet its own climate action targets.
So, in order to reach these ambitious new future targets, Ireland's journey to making offshore wind a major renewable energy source has already begun. Can you walk us through the milestones Ireland has achieved so far and what's next?
Yeah, one of the key milestones on Ireland's offshore wind energy was its first ever offshore wind auction held in May 2023, which awarded 4 projects totaling 3 gigawatts of capacity. These projects are expected to be operational by 2028. The auction is part of the government's broader 2030 climate action plan, which aims to have 80% of Ireland's electricity coming from renewable sources. The next major step is phase 2, which focuses on further offshore projects to meet the 2030 target of 5 gigawatts. Additionally, the Irish government has begun working on developing these strategies, like Powering Prosperity document, to outline long-term plans for offshore wind expansion, focusing on supply chain development and infrastructure improvements.
So, with that being said, how does Ireland's offshore wind growth compare to the rest of Europe? And what are some of the key European initiatives influencing this sector?
Yeah, Ireland is a relatively new player in the offshore wind in comparison to countries like the UK, Denmark, and Germany, but its ambitions are very much aligned with the broader European renewable energy goals. Offshore wind currently accounts for only about 2% of Europe's electricity mix, but Europe aims to install more than 100 gigawatts by 2030. The EU's Fit for 55 package and the European Green Deal, which target carbon neutrality by 2050, are major drivers for this sector. Additionally, the EU's Renewable Energy Directive aims for 42.5% of total energy consumption to come from renewables by 2030. Ireland's offshore wind projects will, of course, play an important role in contributing to these targets.
And what are the major challenges that Ireland faces in achieving its offshore wind goals, and how can these be addressed?
There are several key challenges. One of the biggest is getting the auction process right, as demonstrated by the struggles in other European markets like the UK, and ensuring that there's a competitive and feasible pricing for the contracts for difference, which would be essential going forward. Development costs, risks, including rising raw material prices and inflation, also pose a threat, along with potential supply chain bottlenecks. Permitting delays could also slow down the process as well, given the complex regulatory landscape. Infrastructure development is also a considerable risk, such as things like the grid connection capacity and so on. Ireland must streamline its planning processes and really work closely with the private sector developers to help address these challenges and make things run as smoothly as possible.
Even with those challenges, Ireland's offshore wind development has been described as an ambitious opportunity. What advantages does Ireland have in the sector, and what could offshore wind mean for the country's energy future?
Well, Ireland has several natural advantages in offshore wind, including an abundant supply of wind and access to large maritime areas that are suitable for wind farms. Offshore wind presents an opportunity for Ireland to become really energy independent and, as I highlighted before, a net exporter of energy to the UK and Europe. It would help to meet the growing demand for electricity, especially from industries like data centers and digital technologies, which Ireland has plans for as well. And offshore wind has demonstrated high capacity factors compared to other renewables like solar, meaning it can provide a more reliable energy supply. And if fully implemented, Ireland's offshore wind plans could significantly reduce its carbon emissions and an overall reliance on imported energy.
So, what financial considerations come into play for offshore wind projects, and how are these projects typically funded?
Yeah, offshore wind projects are very capital intensive and involve a significant financial risk, especially during the construction phase. These projects are typically funded through a combination of equity, bank lending, and sometimes export credit agencies. Contracts for difference, or CFDs, play a key role in providing stable long-term revenue streams, which are crucial for attracting private financing. Corporate power purchase agreements, or PPAs, are another mechanism that can support funding by stabilizing the revenue. There's obviously a government connection to all of these, but lenders will also look at things like construction risk, operational risk, and the long-term viability of the technology that is in use. The financial success of these projects depends on really robust contracts, strong supply chain management, and securing competitive financing rates.
And finally, how does KBRA view Ireland's offshore wind development, and what are the main factors that will determine its success?
Yeah, overall, KBRA views the Ireland offshore wind potential as transformative, both for the country's energy markets and its position in Europe. However, the success of this development hinges on several factors, with financing being the most critical. The ability to raise private finance at competitive rates will be essential, and this requires well-structured commercial contracts and well-structured financing transactions. Attracting experienced sponsors and ensuring projects are profitable will be key in maintaining investor interest. Ireland must also demonstrate that it can compete with more mature markets like the UK and Germany by providing a reliable regulatory framework and a favorable environment for offshore wind development.
Thank you to Gordon for a very interesting discussion. This concludes our episode. Please email esg@kbra.com with any questions or comments. We also encourage you to visit KBRA's ESG website at esg.kbra.com, where you can find ESG research related to the topics discussed in this episode, further details on KBRA's ESG approach, and other ESG-related media items. You can also join our mailing list to access our ESG Weekly Roundup newsletter.